Welcome to the Calm Cockpit, where pilots of all levels can find high-performance tools, actionable strategies, and access to professionals who can help you fly smarter and stress less.
Today we're diving into something that affects so many of us, whether we're flying at altitude or grinding through deadlines. That's burnout.
Yeah, and burnout, it's not just being tired. It's that deeper mental, emotional, and physical exhaustion. But sometimes it sneaks in when you've been running way too hard for way too long and without enough recovery. The effects are real. It can impact our clarity, decision-making, sleep, and our safety. So today we're going to cover 3 specific things: how to recognize burnout, what you can do to recover, and how to improve your mental performance and overall happiness without going back into that cycle of burning out all over again.
Calm Cockpit Podcast starts now.
Onyx 1-2 Mike Oscar, runway 27, clear for takeoff.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. I'm Geeta Brown, a midlife student pilot and licensed yoga and meditation educator with over 30 years of experience teaching high performers how to improve their lives without adding stress.
And I'm John Niehaus, professional pilot and flight instructor, and for this episode, burnout expert.
Well, as we were talking earlier, I think I burned out, recovered, and repeated I don't know how many dozens of times before I finally cracked the code in my own life. And now burnout is a thing of the past for me, but I've done it over and over and over and over again. So what exactly is it? I mean, it's such a big thing that even the World Health Organization has a definition for it. So you know that it's maybe a little more common than you think. So they define it as a chronic state of workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed. To which I say, hello to 90% of the United States of America and probably Europe as well. So it can show up in 3 really big ways. You get that physical and emotional exhaustion, that cynicism or detachment from your work, and a noticeable drop in performance, which I've noticed for me and a lot of the people that I've worked with, that usually comes at the very tail end of the burnout. So I would not wait for that drop in performance because usually high performers, we can keep achieving even as we are moving into crumbles. So for me, I have worked a lot with folks as a therapeutic yoga specialist in burnout. So throughout the episode, I'm going to sprinkle in a few personal things, but then also people that I've worked with who've literally washed up on the shores of their lives. And they usually come to me either for small group sessions or one-on-one sessions in yoga. And we deal a lot with the psychological lifestyle solutions as well as the specific yoga practices themselves to help them rehab. So not only myself, but I've worked with a lot of folks in recovering from this. And here's kind of the kicker to this, though. If you're in a high pressure job, and I would count aviation in that, and I would count even general aviation pilots too, in that regard, it can really creep in slowly because we get used to performing in a high pressure environment. And we kind of even like that a little bit. I mean, that's, I think, why we choose to do what we do. We like that feeling of pressure. And so it can be really hard to notice the signs, but you might start feeling like a little more tired than usual, or your recovery isn't as fast. Or you start to get that zoned out feeling during a briefing or a meeting where you kind of snap to and you're like, oh, what just happened for the last 5 minutes? I was somewhere else. And you'll hear people say things a lot like, oh, I'm in a little bit of a slump, or I'll feel better in a few days after my days off. And you might kind of top off after a few days off, but nothing really changes. You get that sort of low level kind of irritation and irritability. And I think for pilots, this is going to hit really hard because you add to that already high pressure environment that you're thriving on, then you throw in a regular schedule where your sleep is getting thrown off, time zone shifts where your circadian rhythm, you don't even know what day of the week it is. So now your physical and physiological system is also under a great deal of stress. Then you've got that constant performance pressure. Better pass your medical. Your passengers may or may not applaud when you land the plane. And then that pressure that we put on ourselves to have that landing that's right on center line and do the mission to great success. And also we can experience a lot of isolation. Whether you're, traveling and working remotely, you might be separated from family for long periods of time. You might be working with different coworkers all the time. So you don't have that culture of being with someone who just kind of gets you. And overall, I've noticed as a newbie to aviation that it is a culture that seems to glorify that pushing it through and toughing it out and covering it up. And I think that's kind of a dangerous attitude for us to have as professionals. That's why we have this podcast to kind of shift that conversation.
It's funny. The World Health Organization, I think they define us very well. And I say us as in Americans in general, because, they're basically saying we don't deal with our things. We let them fester. We let them get to a point where we just go, I can't do this anymore. And I think that's just a interesting thing. And of course, I do agree that pilots specifically, throw in doctors, lawyers, any of those sort of really high performing careers, you get used to it. You get used to the adrenaline, and it's all fine until that adrenaline wears off and that momentum starts to slow. And then everything just kind of stops. Mm-hmm. And I can share some personal stories about that as we get a little bit further into the episode. But that's the scariest part for me, is just like you get used to kind of what you said. You get used to that pace, but the second you let up on the gas, all of a sudden everything floods in and you go, uh-oh, how did I get here? Mm-hmm. So in terms of washing up on your shores, I think I'm still maybe a little bit out by the buoy, but not far. So I can feel it in my bones. And the meta of this episode, as we were putting it together, is, feeling burnout while we're writing an episode about burnout. So
podcaster, heal thyself. Maybe you'll learn some things today.
Yeah. So I'm very anxiously awaiting the tips and tricks of how you may have solved it in your life. But first and foremost, as we're talking about this, let's talk about some red flags. Let's talk about what to look for. Let's find out, what are the symptoms of this? And just, as we were looking up kind of, again, from the World Health Organization and some other sources, these things can be basic and they're going to be different for everybody. Everybody runs their own race. They may fall into the same categories, but the symptoms of what that looks like are going to be different. And they list anything from things like, you're getting enough sleep. You're still tired after a full night's rest, 7-8 hours rest. Yes, there's a certain amount of sleep debt that you do need to recover from. But if you're consistently getting a full night's sleep and you're still not feeling yourself in the morning, okay, let's look at this as a larger symptom of something else. Feeling emotionally flat. You don't have a whole lot of highs. You don't have a whole lot of lows. You're just kind of in the moment, sort of absorbing the shocks and never letting yourself really feel what that is supposed to feel like. Again, that's a little bit sort of subjective to individuals, but I that one I can feel quite a bit. Forgetting little things, kind of what you said in terms of having a conversation with somebody and not really registering what they're saying. It's not that you're distracted. It's not that you're not paying attention. It's, whoa, what happened? I just kind of woke up from sort of being in zombie mode and wasn't really realizing or registering what was being said to me. That even can be as far as going into like just going and doing a task and then forgetting your task midway through. What was I doing again? Where was I going? Mm-hmm. That notion of walking into a room and have that doorway be that forgetful portal where you get into the room and have no idea, why am I here? Or in my case, you land in LA and you're like, I think I'm in New York. Oh, nope, not New York, LA. That's a thing. But then also just kind of generally being irritable sometimes. People ask you to do things and you get impatient, you get annoyed easily. Like something so basic. Somebody asks you a very simple question and you just kind of feel that grit in your gears. The agitation starts up. So it's a lot of these little things, and it sounds so obvious. It sounds so basic because these aren't clinical, things that a doctor needs to tell you. You go, oh yeah, I didn't get enough sleep, I'm going to be irritable, but it's different. It's that chronic everything combined to get to a point where now you are just sort of frozen in place and you don't know how to kind of break free of that. If any of this does sound familiar, if any of this registers, and I'd be wagering to say no matter what your profession is, if you are a for fun flyer and you have a regular job, I don't mean that in a bad way, just non-piloty job, you're going to experience that too. It doesn't matter what you're doing. The likelihood is that the majority of our society has some form of this, whether you're to a point of standstill or if you're still building into that point. It's just the way American society seems to work.
The word out of everything you've said that I think encapsulates it for me and then all of the students that I've worked with is frozen. That is such a hard thing to see when you're frozen in a cycle of burnout. But it's so easy for everyone else to see it in you. So I'm going to kind of illuminate these like red flags you gave just with like really common things that people who like, again, wash up on the shores in a therapeutic yoga session with me have said and that I've seen over and over again. I see a lot of things trying to release that sense of being stuck in this cycle, that frozenness of being sort of flat, overdoing everything, but not able to stop. I see a lot of tension and release seeking behaviors, mostly through drinking and eating. A lot of people will come in and they'll just casually talk about, oh, on Friday, we're going out to this bar. And then on Saturday, we're going to this place. And they've normalized drinking because it is socially acceptable and legal. They've normalized it to where like, that's what they do to quote unquote relax. And I'm like, that's not actually a relaxing activity. Like being with the people is relaxing. Listening to music is relaxing and wholesome. But the drinking to your liver, it is poison. And we know that as it leaves your body, it produces more symptoms of anxiety. So it's perpetuating the very cycle that you're trying to release. Same thing with eating. People will, who doesn't love a great meal out? But I'm talking about that like overeating or seeking more food than you potentially need to enjoy as a way to just break through that cycle of that and what they call anhedonia, that flatness that just can't really seek that pleasure. So trying to get it into the body, basically through the portal of the mouth. See a lot of that, like just trying to break the tension that way, and it doesn't work. And what's interesting is people become more self-aware and they start to do more things for themselves. I notice then they stop talking about drinking. And I'm like, oh, you don't go to those bars anymore or, have wine. They're like, oh no, I haven't even thought about that in a while. They just kind of drop the need for that sort of nightcap because other choices feel more compelling. There are a couple other little red flags. I've had students who come in and the languaging will center around a lot. If someone challenges our ideas about how much we're working, we'll come back at them with like, well, I don't have a choice. I have to stay in this job that's sucking the life out of me because I need the money. Or I have to continue. I have a lot of people who I work with who are caregivers for other folks. And if I suggest something like, hey, bring in a nurse for one night a week, they're like, I can't do that. I can't do that. They're not going to do as good of a job as I can. But the opportunity here is that you're now making yourself sick and you're taking care of someone else who is having a challenge, and bringing in a nurse who is trained and professional to do this isn't an option. So this whole kind of like martyr syndrome of I don't have a choice, I can't make a different choice, that's a real tell for burnout because it's that all or nothing thinking. It's almost like perceiving, like you were saying, if you stop the cycle of burnout, it's almost like people are so afraid they're going to lose themselves so completely. So they'll really push back. Cannot tell you how many times people have come up to me at the beginning of a yoga class and yelled at me. They haven't even taken the class yet. They've yelled at me. Geeta, I'm here because everyone in my life tells me that I need yoga, but I don't think I do. And they stomp to the back of the room and they fling down their mat and they take the yoga class with me. I mean, that's happened to me so many times in my career. Someone's there because their whole family is like, would you please go learn how to relax? And they're fighting it even at the class. Most of them end up staying and kind of digging it, but not always. But if you have this knee-jerk reaction to someone suggesting that maybe there's a slower gear you could take, that's a little tell. One other little thing I notice a lot is that chronic complaining about other people. It's my boss is a jerk, my coworkers, my this, my that. Like the world is conspiring against me and things just have to be this way, not taking that personal power for saying that maybe you could leave the job. Maybe you could choose a slightly different career path. Maybe not now, but you could make plans for 5 years from now to shift things. It's really like externalizing that sense of control. It's everyone else's fault, and it's my responsibility to be a good person and to keep doing this. Otherwise, it says something about who I am. So I think the last thing I tend to see too is a criticism of other people who make different life choices. So
I know people are lazy. They don't work as hard as I do.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. I had one woman I was working with. She was in higher education. She was a dean. They hired some new faculty. The new faculty decided to live in an apartment that was more than half an hour away from campus, which meant that they wouldn't be there on Sundays to attend the events. And this dean was going off on this new faculty, saying how irresponsible they were. And didn't they know that it's a 24/7 job to be a faculty member and they should be on campus 7 days a week? And who did they think they are? And I'm like, this new faculty member has good boundaries. They want to be at home with their family on Sunday so that on Monday morning office hours, they can be there. But to this dean, this person was not worthy. Luckily, this dean did eventually take some yoga with me and changed a little bit with that behavior and doesn't speak about other people in that way. But it's like that externalizing. And that's a lot of this can sound really harsh. I've said these things myself, so I don't want to come off like you people with burnout. I used to be that person who someone would suggest, hey, maybe take a day off. I'd be like, I can't. I have so much to do. I'll never get everything done. I have to work until midnight tonight. It was not a recipe for a happy Gita at all.
It's funny because I feel this in my bones. I do. And the worst is, for me, it's one of those things where I'm kind of rewarded by bad behavior.
Yeah, totally.
For those that don't know, but most of you do, of course, I used to work for NAFI, the National Association of Flight Instructors. And I did that pseudo part-time, or at least that's what I used to call it.
So much so, hang on, let the record reflect that you just won an award from them.
I did.
I forget what it's exactly for, but it was basically for how much you did for NAFI, right? It's like an achievement award.
Yes.
Like
yes.
Literally, you have been rewarded for burning yourself out.
Right.
You have the plaque to prove it.
I do. Yeah. It's funny because at one point back in my charter days, I was doing, I think at my busiest year, it was 800 and some hours of flying.
Wow.
8 days on, 5 days off. And NAFI would come with me in my flight bag. It would be my, laptop working from a hotel room. And generally it would be get to the hotel room at 8:00, have a quick dinner, pop open the laptop, NAFI from 9 to midnight, whatever needed to be done, pull lists, run reports, all that fun stuff. Go to sleep, do it again. 5 days off generally was your catch-up days for NAFI. And, this has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with me.
Yeah.
And it was because I loved it. So none of it was negative by any means. But it was funny because I changed companies, and I was talking with one of our pilots in my current gig, and he's like, yeah, so you're part-time with NAFI. I said, well, sort of.
On paper, you're part-time.
Right. And he goes, so like, what does that mean? Like 5-6 hours a week or something? And I was like, no, it's like 40 hours. And he goes, well, that's not part-time. And also, how in the world are you still standing?
Yep.
And he goes, and how long have you been doing this? I said, well, I started about 14 years ago. And he goes, and in the meantime, you were an airline pilot, you were a charter training captain, and now you're with us. And what else is it that you do in your life? You have a 5-year-old and all of these other things going on. I'm like, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so like it comes to the realization of the adrenaline, the momentum. As long as I kept it going, I was rewarded because I got this done. I got that done. I developed this thing. I made this. I changed careers. I got all of these professional rewards. And now I left NAFI back in July because I was fully recognizing at that point that that burnout was real.
Yeah.
And oh, well, this is going to solve all my problems. My flying job has really died down. It's not anything like it used to be. It's significantly less flying, more time at home. Get rid of NAFI. Everything will just go back to normal. Well,
Yep.
two things happened. A, that adrenaline wore off, the momentum wore off. That rolling stone all of a sudden went from being smooth to sort of moss covered.
Yeah.
And you start to get that like remorse almost. I'm used to getting all of these things done. And we talked about this before the show, but in the period of time where I could get 4 things done, now I can get 1 or 2 things done, and that's still okay. By most people's standards, that would be okay. But all I can think about is, well, that's not achieving what I used to achieve. And then you get this like muddy middle where you kind of get, like you said, frozen in that moment of, I feel myself when I'm getting all these things done, but I also recognize by doing less, I'm trying to correct the situation, but somewhere between those two things, I get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where I'm at today. I mean, like I said about the burnout episode, I mean, it took me a little while just to get things moving because I just kind of stared at it for a while.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and the interesting quote that I saw when I was putting this together, and I think it makes a lot of sense, is this notion that burnout thrives in silence is what came up. You know, you get used to the feeling, you get used to what it is. And in some cases, in my case, you kind of enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it's not there, not burnout not being there, but the pressure not being there, all of a sudden you sink further deep into it. And that's where I've started to notice that I've gotten. And it's just an interesting retrospective on where we are and how we got here.
You know, I wish that we taught self-awareness strategies in the public schools. This is why I teach yoga, meditation in the public schools and have for many, many years. And it is such a crucial skill because what you're talking about is you recognize that you're feeling burned out. I mean, and kudos to you for everything you did with NAFI and your jobs and, you know, your family. Like, it's freaking insane, John. You're like a machine. But I'm not surprised that after more than a decade, you finally went like, whoa, something's got to give here. But then you corrected it on the outside with just a schedule change. Oh, and by the way, you decided to start a podcast because, you know, that little hole had to be filled with something. but you did that external change. And then you're kind of, like you said, frozen because the change that hasn't happened yet, I think it is happening, maybe. I don't want to shrink you. I'm no shrink, but it's in between the ears, right? It's the mindset. And that's why I say, like, I wish we taught self-awareness strategies and self-soothing strategies in school, just like we do reading and arithmetic. Because had you been taught some of those strategies, you might have some clues about how to look at yourself more objectively internally. At least that's what it's given to me and to my students. Because what I've noticed with myself rehabbing, myself getting out of that cycle of burning out, recovering, but then just doing it all over again. And then all the students that I've worked with, that we are driven by those things that we haven't dealt with. And that we can change the job or we can change the relationship or we can get the divorce if we need to. But if we haven't dealt with what's in between our ears, our head, and our small traumas and big traumas, that's what is going to drive our behavior every single time. For me, getting over burnout was actually grappling with the limiting beliefs I had about myself, that I felt like I had to be productive and that productivity had to be recognized by other people in order for me to have worth as a human. Mm-hmm. How sad is that? But I had to actually really sit there with that. And the way I dealt with it was in meditation and seeing those thoughts. And then I had a life coach at one point. It was actually a career coach, but she actually was more of a life coach and would just help me look at those things objectively and just do different writing exercises to pick that apart. And that limiting belief that I wouldn't have self-worth unless I was productive, every time it was going to drive my behavior unless I challenged that limiting belief and started to tell myself I'm worthy just because I'm here. And I am enough just because I'm here. It's independent of my productivity as an adult. Maybe it's a little easier for me because I work so much too with children who have special needs. And I've worked with adults who have things like Parkinson's or dementia or strokes. And I never look at those kids and say, hey, you'll never have a traditional job. You don't have any worth. What are you doing here? I never look at them like that. So why would I look at myself like that? It really started to change my conception that, life just has inherent value, whether I've checked 57 things off my to-do list or not. But I don't know. What does that bring up for you? Those that's my limiting belief, self-doubt, self-worth, all day long, every day. It's why I achieve so much. I was trying to prove that I had value just to be here.
I don't want to say it's sad because I have thrived in that particular environment.
Yeah.
The more we do these episodes, the more, and we knew it going in, but it's the realization has really hit, the more these episodes are connected. I mean, you talk about burnout and you talk about the idea of having to be a high performer because of proving yourself in things. So now we're talking back to the episode of Bob Mader with the imposter complex.
Right.
We are talking about the previous episode to this one where we talked with Dr. Adrian about all of these different things that are going on in your brain. And it's all just part of one big web. So as you go through one episode to the next, you're going to see these common things and things will be repeated, but it makes sense how they're put together into this larger picture. And I think that the difficult part, and I give a shout out to sort of our younger audience listeners. I really wish I could consider myself one of them now, but
relative to me, you're young. Relative to me, you're so young. You're a baby.
Right. As I start to age out of that, it's a different experience, because when you do start to find some of that traction in your career, when you do start to find some of that stability, the notion of, well, I'm going to slow down, I'm going to do these things for me, it becomes a lot easier. You know, when you're a flight instructor, in my case, I think my first year as a flight instructor, I made $11,000. Like that's so far below the poverty line that it's like incredible. And
that's
granted,
like,
this was a few years ago.
Wonder Bread and ramen for dinner, right?
Right. My parents were still paying my cell phone bill and my car insurance, because $10,000 a year doesn't really do much.
Yep.
And so it's burnout, or whatever you want to call it, the grind that is so celebrated these days. Rise and grind. Here's my coffee cup. Go out and do it again tomorrow. Hustle. These are all just words for survival. That survival that brings you success, especially early on in your career. You don't have the experience. You don't have that career job, the thing that you think you'll hang on to for any long period of time. It's always, what's next? What am I going to do? You can't slow down.
Yes.
The overextension, the burnout later on in a career becomes, in some cases, a necessity just to get to where they want to go, because there's no other choice.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think whether you're in aviation or not, anyone can relate to that. New teachers, it's the same way. We take every single gig you'll give us, every single after school, before school, tutoring. People are used to that. Climbing the career ladder can be like that. What I'm noticing is different for some of the younger teachers that I'm mentoring now, particularly in yoga. I guess I have that elder wisdom, so I mentor a lot of the up and coming ones. They seem to be better at setting boundaries around their self-care and setting boundaries around their time, even though they're in that hustle and grind of an early freelance yoga and or music career. They're better able to schedule those days off and protect those days off. The ones who don't, again, they a lot of times end up in front of me. But even the ones that seem to be really, scheduled to the hilt because they have to be to make their paltry amount of money they're going to make as a brand new teacher, they seem to know and are planning already for, this isn't going to be forever. In 3 years, I'm going to be doing X, Y, and Z, and then I'll be transitioning this way. So they're doing it not with this is just the way my life is going to be forever. They're doing it with an endpoint in mind to I'm not planning on keeping this level of work going for the rest of my life, which is very different from my generation. And the wake up call that I had the last time I got over burnout, I was in my music therapy degree, and I had just passed my board certification, was newly minted, fresh, dewy fresh music therapist. And I went in to talk to the woman who had been my supervisor throughout all of it. And I said, now that I passed the board certification, I'm finally going to get some of that time back. I can ease off, because I was doing what you were doing. I was working full time at a college teaching. And I was also working as a music therapist and getting the boards and getting all of that, doing the internship, basically working 2 jobs, right? Teaching college full time, and then music therapy degree, internship, and board certification. So 2 full-time jobs. Said, I got it. Board certified music therapist. I can now pick my clients, pick my schedule. I'm going to get sort of my life back, my ability to schedule. I knew this was a temporary thing for 4 years. I'm good. And she looked at me and she burst out laughing. And I was like, why are you laughing? She's like, because you think that things are going to change now. It's not. You're just going to find you're going to be like me. You're going to just find another project to do. There's going to be another thing to come along the way, another board to sit on, another research project to do. This is going to be your life for the rest of your life until you retire, that you're just going to be constantly doing all of these things. And I looked right at her and I was like, inside my head, I went, oh, hell no. But to her face, I smiled and nodded. And I said, well, thank you. This has been a great experience. I really enjoyed it. Yay, music therapy. Bye. And I left her office. And as I was walking to my car, I was like, no more. I've been on this rat's wheel too long. I'm going to make some substantive changes in my life. I had no idea how, but I was like, I'm going to change, because I do not want to be 65 years old and giving a young person that same advice, that this is your life now. You're just going to be constantly stressed and overworking and not seeing your family. I was like, I'm done. So thank God for my mentors in yoga and things to help me realize that I could still be a high performer and very productive, and actually, have a life too, in terms of just enjoying relaxation and ease. So anyway, that was a bit of a rant. I'm off my soapbox.
Yeah. It's funny because, like you mentioned, I did leave NAFI and started a podcast and volunteer at the university.
Uh-huh.
And I have found a couple boards to volunteer on. And then I follow it up with, went on vacation and proceeded to complain to you about how much I don't like going on vacation. So I don't know anything about this.
I consider burnout, it was for me a call to action. I think for me, it was a sign that the way I was living, having 2 full-time jobs at the same time, was out of alignment with my deeper core values. And for me, and for all the folks that I've worked with through this process, very often the antidote, it's not easy and it takes time, because these realizations come with reflection and conversations like this one and practices. And over time, we figure these things out, especially if we're lucky enough to live to the age where we have gray hair, right? As you said, we just have more time to figure these things out. So very often the antidote is to allow even a tiny space in whatever way you do quiet reflection, so that I could hear what was underneath all of the striving. And for myself and for my students, it's looked like lots of different things. For some people, it's been journaling. Some people, it's just been taking walks with the dog on the beach every day. Some people have taken up Tai Chi, which is a very moving, meditative, contemplative practice, but done in groups where they could just be with themselves, but doing something more active. Some people, it's seated meditation. They love that. Just being 15 minutes a day to just be with themselves lets them start to, in a safe way, explore the junk that's under the surface that's driving this behavior. For some people, it's been yoga. I've worked with folks who are devout in the Jewish faith, so prayer has helped them. I've worked with some people who it's been gardening. They're like just being out in nature. I've worked with folks who are runners, and for them, running has been the way that they're like, every time I go on a run, I'm churning through this stuff in my mind. And because my body is in motion and being productive, quote unquote, that's a space though where I can hear what's actually in my mind and heart. And that whatever way you get that quiet reflection, it's helped myself and my students to then look at the core values. How do I want to feel every day in my life? How do I want to show up? For some people, it's patient. Some people, it's they want to be compassionate. Some people, they want to be joyful. Some people, they want to be of service. And when they find their core values, then I notice that people start to make choices. Like I said earlier, alcohol just starts to drop away because it's not in alignment with how they want to feel. And it's not like, I'm not going to drink because it's bad for me. They're just like, yeah, I'm not interested in it because I know that tomorrow morning I'm going on that hike with that group of people and I can't wait to do it. It's going to be awesome. So if we start to then, some people, it has meant a career shift. I've worked with some folks who were working at places that were really toxic and horrible. And they're like, I can't afford to leave now, but I've got an exit strategy for 2 years from now. I'm going to slowly start my own business. And when that becomes profitable enough, I'm going to leave the job I'm at. Now they're working harder. This particular person, Robert, that I'm thinking of, he's working way harder now than he was at his job previously, but he's happier because in his own business, it's aligned with his core values. And he's able to decide what he wants to do and how he wants to do it and choose his schedule and his people accordingly. So getting over burnout doesn't necessarily mean doing less work. It might just mean choosing the types of work and the people that you're associating with in a very different way. I'm all for doing all the things. Why not? But I think it's like how you do it as much as what you're doing.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I am, as again, we talked in the pre-show debrief, or brief, I guess.
Pre-brief.
Pre-brief. Yeah. I might be addicted to checking boxes. It's the task completion that I enjoy. And so allowing myself to slow down in some cases means less boxes to check. And therefore that like little voice gets annoyed. So,
yep.
It's finding that happy medium. And when we were looking at kind of the mitigation techniques, I mean, they talk about sort of short-term resets, long-term strategies. Walk us through kind of some of the things that might be available to people who are just kind of sitting there going, yeah, I'm in this. It's not terrible. I've got things to do, places to be, but I would love to find a way to just kind of bring that level down a little bit. What do people do?
So I want to talk briefly about what you said about checking boxes, because this is so resonates with me, as I told you before, and I will now tell the world. I love checking boxes so much that even when I'm on vacation, I make to-do lists for myself. And the number one strategy that helped me getting myself out of the pattern of just putting more on my schedule was to make my self-care part of my to-do list. And I showed it to John. I have it somewhere here, but every week I have what I call a one sheet. And that one sheet is just all the projects, all the things, all the students, all the writing projects, all the things organized so that I can see where I'm at and that I'm making good choices about the next thing to do. But the first thing on that list is actually health and wellness, that category. And I list out what I want to do that week for my health and wellness, including daily meditation, hatha yoga so many times, taking my vitamins. The next category on my overall life strategy to-do list is family and friends. Am I reaching out to, and I literally will call, like, text your friend, Kristen. Like, I have to like make it part of a to-do thing. And then it will go on my daily one sheet, which is my daily thing I'm going to do. And when I call that friend or I do that meditation, I check it off. Because when I first rehabbed out of this cycle of burnout, I had to, like you said, I had to be able to check it off. Otherwise, it felt like it wasn't worthy or valuable. And it's just a habit that I've stuck with. And I'm like, if it's important enough for me to write down that I want to do, like, I don't know, this and this marketing for my yoga studio, and I want to, study this much for the FA written, if it's important enough for me to schedule that, shouldn't I be tracking if I'm taking my darn vitamins and like getting enough sleep? So like actually scheduling it made it real and important to me. And that's something that I have stuck with to this day. And when I'm on vacation, I literally set a theme for each vacation, whether it's if I need to have more joy, then I'll say like, this is all about the joy and I'm seeking those activities that are joyful, or I need to unplug and rest more. I'm going to look for restful activities, so that even on vacation, I feel like it's productivity because I'm choosing how I want to feel and respond rather than just kind of going along in that gray frozen area. It works for me. I am that nerd that has a vacation strategy that tells me to relax, but how I need to relax so that it's actually useful to me. Okay. So one of the number one sort of tips and things that I work with folks who are recovering from burnout is something that was taught to me, and I absolutely love it. It's called creating a rhythm for your life. And creating a rhythm for your life means looking at it big picture seasonally. However, your work is usually dictated by work because that dictates our schedule. So looking at things seasonally, looking at things monthly, and looking at things daily. So at the start of every season, I'll have my students sit down. We're transitioning to fall, autumn here soon. I'll say, sit down in autumn and say, what are the things you need in your life so that this can be a very productive and happy autumn season for yourself? Is it more exercise? Is it less exercise? Sleep? What is it that you're going to prioritize kind of quote unquote working on in the self-care realm? And how are you going to create a rhythm for that will work this season? Also looking seasonally, do you have regular vacations or breaks scheduled? Or are you just going off of reacting to the schedule that's being presented to you? So being proactive about like putting in the calendar, these 3 days are days off, and no meetings can go in there. Nothing can go in there because it's literally blocked off in your calendar that you're not available. If you do not do that, something will get scheduled in that time. So actually scheduling the time and protecting it and recognizing that it's just as important as the time when you're on call for work. So that sort of seasonal schedule, and that goes into the monthly schedule, again, scheduling those regular on and off times as you can, given your job. And then daily, this is where I come down to daily, and I'll look at my day. I'll be like, hey, have I scheduled in any time to have like 20 minutes to just like watch Grace and Frankie on Netflix and eat a popsicle? Like, that's my happy place. Like, I will actually like schedule that into the day and then come back to work feeling very refreshed from some laughter and popsicleness. So creating this rhythm for your life is going to look different for every person, but being intentional about that is a key ingredient for the people that I've noticed get themselves out of the cycle or they stay stuck in it. It's really about taking accountability for what you can manage in your schedule and your life rather than just reacting to what the boss says you have to do. You actually have a lot more agency than you realize. Even when you're on the low rung of the ladder, you can still self-advocate. I don't know. How does that's big picture stuff. I know we have some shorter strategies we want to share with people, but how does that resonate? Have you ever done that, or do you just kind of like react to like what's happening?
My family makes me go on vacation and then I get agitated.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Force fun. You will have fun.
Right? So no, I think that the important lesson I need to just learn to take it to heart myself is that you can be a self-proclaimed high performer and not allow is a strong word, but not fall victim to just constant burnout stress. There is a happy medium there, and arguably from what I'm hearing from you is that it might be a survival mechanism at first, but if you can get out of it, arguably your performance could even increase because your desire, your care for what you're doing can increase. And therefore, yes, maybe you're not doing as much, but you're doing what you're doing better. And I think that that's the lesson that our pilots and our aviators in this group can take from this is, well, why are we talking about this in the first place? We're talking about it because the whole point of the podcast is to free up your mind so that you can do what you do better.
Exactly.
And so if you are burnt out, if you are stressed, if you're in that situation where it's that vicious cycle of you're burnt out and then you're nervous because you're burnt out, or you're stressed because you're burnt out, and all that does is fuel it more, guess what happens to your flying? You know, you're still capable. You're still a wonderful aviator, but is your approach going to be as good?
Yep.
Is your landing going to be as good? Is your ability and attention to detail to create your flight plan and to manage your performance and to make sure that your fuel is good and your weight and balance is accurate? The attention to detail will increase, and you will find that maybe you didn't do it in a half hour. Maybe it took you 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But your ease in the situation and the accuracy of what you're doing increases. So
Yes.
it eases off the more you get used to sort of that strategy of doing things.
It is a total paradox and is the one I used to fight myself on all the time. And then students fight with me all the time on it. One of the students who came up to me and yelled at me at the beginning of class and said, "I'm here to do yoga because everyone in my life says I need it. And I don't think I need it. I hate this." And he went to the back of the room. This is a grown adult professional woman who said this. She came up to me like, I don't know, 4 or 5 classes later. She runs her own business and she's also a visual artist. And she said, "Oh, that first class you taught, I hated it. I teach a very gentle meditative class. It's literally everything we're talking here is embodied in the action of the class. Teaching yourself how letting go, releasing a little bit actually gives you the clarity and energy to make better choices and to use minimum effort with maximum efficiency." Most people, you can see them in the first classes they take with me. They're chomping at the bit because they want that hot power yoga where they're in the bendy positions and they're feeling lots of sensation and they're productive. Even when they're doing yoga, they're pushing. And she was like, "I hated that first class. I was like a racehorse chomping at the bit. I want more. I want more. I want more." And she's like, "But," I said, "I'm going to come back and give it at least 3 or 4 classes because it's not fair to judge after just one." She's like, "So I forced myself to come back 3 more classes." And she was like, "I am so pissed at you." She's so sweet. She was being funny, but she's like, "I'm so pissed at you because I felt, and I couldn't deny that for the rest of the day, I felt like everything was so much easier." She was like, "I got all this stuff done for business work in like half the time. I had time to make myself lunch. I slept better that night." And she was like, "I thought it was a fluke, but the more I trained myself to ease off, to just use the minimum amount of effort, to pay attention to what's happening instead of forcing." She's like, "Suddenly my days were flowing and they were so much better and easier." And she was like, "I wanted to hate this so much because it goes against everything that I've been trained to do in business, which is to push, to grind, to hustle." She's like, "But I couldn't deny what was actually happening when I tried the approach." And I was like, "Will you please go tell all of America what you just said? Because it's not me. It's just finding whatever's going to work for you that feels like a way to experiment and workshop with this idea of easing off and using the right amount of effort at the right time." That's why people like things like yoga, tai chi, martial arts, archery, walking in nature, hiking, because they force us to go at a pace that is in accordance with how we were biologically designed to function optimally. It gives us a way to like workshop and practice it so that when we leave those activities, we go back into our everyday life and we're shooting that approach into Aspen. Our body and mind knows how to enter into that flow state because we've been training it in these other discrete activities like meditation, tai chi, yoga, hiking, whatever it is for you, where you're training yourself to be in that flow state. So I would recommend for anybody, one of the key ways to rehab from burnout is find something that's going to help you move at a reasonable pace that has a meditative aspect where you're completely absorbed in the activity, but yet you're learning how to do it with minimum effort, maximum efficiency. That has tremendous value to your resilience muscle of your brain, as we talked about with Dr. Adrian, of understanding then how to take that into your everyday life. And once you feel the benefit of letting go, it becomes easier then because it's not just an abstractive Gita talking about it. Last point I'll make about that is I had many, many colleagues over the years when I was teaching at a music school. I was there for about 14 years. And they would say to me for 7 of those years, "Oh, that's good for you. That whole like being more chill, that works for you, but that's just for you. It's not for me." Over time, as they headed towards burnout, they'd start to scoot their chair closer to me and they'd be like, "So this meditation thing, could maybe you teach me a little bit of it?" And they'd start to sidle up, or they'd come tell me, "Hey, I tried a Tai Chi class. I'm really digging it. I'm really loving it." I cannot tell you how many of those faculty then, after numerous professional development workshops I led and faculty classes I led, came up to me later and said, "I always thought that was something for other people, that like it wasn't possible to like feel good and have a good relationship with my husband and like cook my own food and have time on the weekends and be this kick-ass musician. I thought it wasn't possible." But now I see it's actually the only way that I can do it for the rest of my career. So a lot of them flipped their script. I watched them go through like the denial and the repression. It's for other people hitting their own burnout and then working through it in whatever way worked for them. So try it and see what happens for you, because that's the only way you're going to know. You're not going to believe me. Suffering is a great teacher, right? Talk to me about sleep and some of these other short-term relief things. What would you suggest for people?
Yeah. So firstly, I think it's also kind of a throwback to one of our early episodes with Tammy Barlett and the mental performance training. I mean, this is probably, I would argue to say this is the first step into getting through a curriculum like hers and increasing your performance capacity, because you're shedding some of these things.
Yes.
And again, as we already said, we're expanding our viewpoints and allowing for that increase in mental performance and perception. So I think it's so important.
Yeah.
So much of the mitigation strategies that came up when we were doing research for this, we don't need to get into super deep, because a lot of it, again, is the things that we talked about when it comes to stress and nutrition and anxiety and all of these things. So things like getting a better amount of sleep and, making sure you're trying to get that 8 hours, but also avoiding caffeine late in the day and avoiding your small devices towards the evening, all the things that I don't do. So this is like, I'm a hypocrite. So do what I say, don't do what I do, because I do all of these things. Coffee in the middle of the day is not something that I am in the process of giving up at the moment. Things like eating well and the omega-3s. I mean, both Lachey and Adrian and everybody that we've all talked about these things so many times. And I think that the fact that they keep coming up just further proves how important it is to be focused on some of these important and fairly easy things. It's not that hard to have, walnuts in the middle of the day every so often. I do it when I go to training, and Lachey keeps telling me that if you do it the day of, it doesn't matter. It's when you do it leading to it.
Correct.
But of course, it's like flossing before going to the dentist. See, I did my homework. Other little things, like you said, the mindfulness moments, taking breaks. That break could just be a micro break where it's I'm going to take 15 minutes during the day. It doesn't have to be a 5-day vacation. In some cases, the 5-day vacation, like me, leads to more stress than just, whatever. Not that you shouldn't do that, but it's just the excuse that I make. So whatever that looks like to you, whatever that joy moment that brings you pause, again, it sounds so basic. We're not giving you anything that is completely life-changing unless you truly decide to adopt some of these things. And I think you'll probably find that maybe it is. So, I think that the first step in all of this, and part of the reason why we even decided to do this as a podcast topic to begin with, is like so many of these issues, the first really big moment is actually talking about it. And so many of these people, especially the majorly successful people, those 4-bar pilots, the airline guys that are flying back and forth from, JFK to Milan and all this stuff. And you're going, boy, that sounds really amazing. You don't realize the sacrifice, the hard work, and everything that they gave up to get there. And they're probably having the time of their lives. But at the same time, are they facing these things and just not telling you? I'm sure some of them are. Some of them probably aren't. Everybody's different. But when you can't see it in somebody else, then it's hard to see it in yourself.
Same here. My husband and I were talking about the other day. I'm like, our lives did not work out the way either one of us planned, at all. I will not get into the backstory, but there has been, significant trauma, particularly in my 20s and 30s. But I am so happy that I am where I am, because I now take ownership for all of these decisions. And as you were saying, with these strategies, like get enough sleep, eat some omega-3s, schedule rest, schedule your vacations. They're simple strategies. What is it? Common sense, but common sense is not so common. But I want to just validate that, there's simple strategies, but it's real work, and that work matters. The work of making sure you're getting enough sleep, the work of making sure you're staying hydrated, of eating the foods, that work is just as real and as important as studying for your next recurrent, or in my case, 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, 16 hours a day, 18 hours a day, 20 hours a day, 21 hours a day, 22 hours a day, 23 hours a day, 24 hours a day, 25 hours a day, 26 hours a day, 27 hours a day, 28 hours a day, 29 hours a day, 30 hours a day, 31 hours a day, 32 hours a day, 33 hours a day, 34 hours a day, 35 hours a day, 36 hours a day, 37 hours a day, 38 hours a day, 39 hours a day, 40 hours a day, 41 hours a day, 42 hours a day, 43 hours a day, 44 hours a day, 45 hours a day, 46 hours a day, 47 hours a day, 48 hours a day, 49 hours a day, 50 hours a day, 51 hours a day, 52 hours a day, 53 hours a day, 54 hours a day, 55 hours a day, 56 hours a day, 57 hours a day, 58 hours a day studying for the FAA written, it's just as important. And sometimes just having, to your point, another person to look at you and say, that matters to me that you're getting enough rest and fun. It matters to me that you got that time to play that video game, that work is real and it matters, is part of changing the conversation around this for us validating for each other. Like, yeah, I'm championing you taking a day off. Good job. Like, way to go. Instead of like hiding it and doing what I used to do, which is I would pretend that I had another commitment that day and be like, oh, I'm in an all day workshop. I wasn't in an all day workshop. I was taking the day off, but I was too ashamed to say I was taking the day off. So I would lie and say I was working. Like, how pathetic is that? But that's what I had to do initially to like claim my own personal time. So I'm here to tell you this work is real and it matters. And to John's point, burnout recovery, another tip, definitely enlist the help of trusted others. One of the key ways I kept myself out of that last burnout cycle after I had that last conversation with that music therapist who was like, oh, this is just your life from now on, is I went to 2 friends that I had at the time and I said, here's what I do. I put too much on my plate and then I burn out and get exhausted. I usually get sick. And then I say, I'm not going to do that again. And then over the course of 3 to 6 months, I just do the same thing over again. Can you please, every time I tell you about a new project that I'm excited with, you have my permission to ask me, does this align with your core values? How much time is it logistically going to take? And are you doing it again? You dumb shit. Like, I literally told them, like, check in with me. Like, you have my permission to call me on it. And they would. And I'd say, you know what? This one is a little different because I've said that I'm only going to do, 1 day a month and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, cool. Yeah, that sounds good. You set a better boundary. I literally had people in my life that I said, you have to check me on this and check in with it. It kept me accountable so I wouldn't slip again. Another thing I did was I found a neutral person to talk to. I got a life coach at the time. It was a business coach, but they did a lot more life coaching. Just someone that I could check in with and be like, do I really want to take that contract on? They say it's not going to be a lot of work, but it's going to be more work. They help me kind of like check myself from getting too overblown with this. One last little thing I'd say about sort of burnout recovery is learn to recognize your tells. I think you said this at the beginning of the episode, it looks different for everyone, right? Like, my tells are that I start to go into overwhelm. When I start to feel like I look at my daily one sheet, like I said, I have a sheet every day. And when I sit there and I'm frozen and I look at all of it and I go like, there's too much to do. I can't possibly do all of it. I don't know. I better just start going on to Facebook and doing something else. That's usually a tell for me that I'm on overwhelm and I have too much on my plate and I need to take something off or take a beat or even just go take a walk for half an hour and then look at things again. I've learned to recognize my tells of starting to head towards burnout, and that's been really helpful because I can catch myself before I slip right back into it because it's such a vicious cycle. Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, don't you think your passengers want you to be a sharp, high-performing, happy pilot?
Happy pilots. Not just like awesome, but like happy. Like, when do we ever think that like we're not allowed to be happy and joyful at doing what we're doing? We have to be like serious and working, and if we're not doing that, then it means that we're not serious. Somewhere along the line, we thought that like being burned out and stressed means that somehow we're good at things. Nope. Being able to play and be joyful is one of the highest senses of mastery. Look at anyone who's a masterful pilot. They're focused in the zone and loving it, but there's also a sense of ease around what they do. Right? It's like the sculptor who knows just the right bit to take off the marble. They're not gritting at it. They're doing just the right amount of effort at the right amount of time.
The harder you grip the yoke, the worse your landing's going to be.
There's our metaphor for the episode. You just found it. It's like that light grip, let the plane fly, do the adjustments as needed, but otherwise don't need to overdo. It's perfect.
So, as we wind this episode down, I think that we'd really like to know where you guys are at, listeners, pilots, and of all skill levels. Like where are you at with this in your life, and what sort of strategies do you use to try to bring that joy back for you and slow down just a little bit? Or are you stuck? Like I want to know stories about that too, because like I said, I've gotten stuck. Maybe I still am. Who knows? There's a little bit of all of that, but we're all sort of working on our own journeys here. If it does kind of bring some things to mind, don't be afraid to talk about it. Talk about it with your friends, your coworkers, your people in your peer circles. And, maybe if you want to generate that conversation, you can share the podcast with them. Boy, that would be very helpful if I do say so myself. And, don't ever forget to find us on various social media platforms, calmcockpit@gmail.com. You can contact us that way. And, Geeta, anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I want to talk to my general aviation pilots, particularly those of you who are in primary training. If you are listening, I understand you because I'm right there with you. I know that burnout is really common at that stage of training. A lot of people quit after they solo, or they quit like right before the check ride. And you better believe that burnout is part of it because it's a grind and you can't see the finish line. You think it's never going to happen. A lot of fears are coming up. If you are in that stage, please drop me an email, calmcockpit@gmail.com. Want to hear your story, want to hear what you're struggling with. And if there's things that you're learning that are working to help you push through that primary training, want to hear from my general aviation pilots because this is real and it affects us as well. So please reach out, calmcockpit@gmail.com. I would be happy to hear your story, whether or not you want us to share that publicly, because the show really is for all of us pilots, for us to have these conversations. So we'd love to hear from you. If you are burned out, we love you. If you're not burned out, we love you. We've been really enjoying this podcast and hope you found this useful today. Please drop us a little 5-star review. We'd appreciate it. It helps other people to find us. And we look forward to hearing from you guys. I think that's a wrap on today's episode.
And as always,
fly smarter
and stress less.
Airbus Tower 1 departure is Airbus 321. Traffic holding crossing runway 33 left 3 lane.